We also have analysis for you on some of the things that were said during that briefing. In fact, political analysts Sanusha Naidu and Berry Hanyana join us now to discuss the Zondo briefing. And it appears that we only have you, Sanusha. Thank you so much for your time. What do you make of some of the key points that the Deputy Chief Justice said? Perhaps let me start with the biggest announcement of the day is that our President, Cyril Ramaphosa, will be appearing at the Commission after all, even though the date has not been confirmed yet, but we do understand it will be around March 2021.
Good afternoon, Unathi, and to the listeners and to viewers. Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing because I think in a way it kind of juxtaposes what's happening with former President Zuma, who's applying to the High Court and taking it further in terms of going to the apex court to say that he doesn't need to appear before the commission, he doesn't need to answer questions. And of course, in the case of President Ramaphosa, there are issues where I think as the Deputy Chief Justice had laid out and outlined in his press briefing that at the time when some of the evidence, or rather the evidence that's being heard before the commission, at that period, that time frame, President Ramaphosa was in the executive. He was deputy president. He was in the executive of the state. So obviously, he appearing before the Justice Commission, the Justice and the State Capture Commission indicates that he's willing. He needs to actually contextualize. I mean, to write that report, he needs to make sure that all the evidence is interpreted in a way that he can then provide a cohesive, coherent report that doesn't have many gaps in it, and he gets it all right in that context. And so putting it out there right now, I think it, on the one hand, I can see that Twitter is basically just lighting up with regard to President Ramaphosa is going to appear before the Zondo Commission. And then, of course, there's all questions about, was there something that he did? Were there some transactions that need to be accounted for, et cetera, et cetera. But I also think it has another dimension, and that juxtaposing dimension that I spoke about earlier is the fact that we are sitting in a situation where former President Zuma is resisting and desisting from going there and getting his lawyers to say that there's again questions about the Deputy Justice Commission and how he is handling the case. There's false statements. There's all kinds of accusations flying around. And so I think it makes a very interesting point. But there were other issues that came out in this press briefing, which I think also makes us very aware of how expensive this commission has been. And I think that in itself was also something in terms of the price tag that we see, which is quite a lot of money. Mm. But again, I think what's important is that we also see that there's, I don't know how many gigabytes of data that has and evidence that has been basically correlated. But in terms of the number of witnesses going into the thousands, in terms of the evidence that was presented, I think it's quite it has been quite a spectacular event, but also an informative event, and also a frustrating commission at times, because you had people like Dudu Manene, you had others who have just completely not understood, in inverted commas, not understood or just refused to comply with the terms of reference of this commission.
In fact, I have that number. I think it's 1 billion gigabytes of data on corruption and fraud. That was what was announced there. But going back to your earlier point about the importance of President Cyril Ramaphosa going into the commission in March of 2021, I mean, how important was it that Deputy Chief Justice Zondo made that decision? Do you think there was some form of pressure? Because what we have seen is that people that have been going to the commission over these couple of months is when somebody has obviously said something about them that might implicate them, and then they are called to the commission to respond to some of those allegations. That is not necessarily the case with Cyril Ramaphosa, though.
Yeah, I think when the Deputy Chief Justice explained his decision to request and ask President Ramaphosa to appear before the Zondo Commission, and I think it was around about 2018 when this all started to come together. I think it was based on the idea, and if I understood him in the press conference today correctly, I think what he was saying was that at the time in which all of this evidence that he's hearing, or the evidence that's being presented before him, is a time when President Ramaphosa was in the executive. He held a very important position in office. And of course, he wants to hear, in terms of what happened, he wants to hear to what extent President Ramaphosa can provide more evidence to the commission. Now, here's the tricky part, Unathi. The tricky part here is that people will start using this as the basis to say that maybe there were some kind of transactions that took place that don't seem above board, and therefore the deputy justice is asking, chief justice is asking Ramaphosa to come in and present himself before the commission. There could be those that will say that yes, he was aware of everything that was going on, all of the preceding data and all of the preceding evidence that has been presented by these 2,000 plus witnesses and others and evidence-based leaders, etc. All of this then will have to be examined in terms of the awareness that President Ramaphosa had of some of these transactions which were not above board. Now, it is a very, very difficult situation for President Ramaphosa because he'll have to answer the questions that will be put forward to him. But I also think we have to, towards the tail end of the press briefing, where the Deputy Chief Justice made a very interesting point, is that some of the ministers, some of those that are sitting in the executive today, didn't come willingly before the commission, and I think he's also trying to show that this commission has a terms of reference. It has to perform its duties. It has to execute whatever the mandate is that has been set in terms of that terms of reference. And more importantly, I think the challenge for the Deputy Chief Justice is how does he get that report in the next 3 months? He's asking for an extension until June because he needs to put that report together, which can have very, very significant implications, not just in terms of state capture, corruption, tender fraud, whatever, but it also means what kind of punitive action are we going to see? Any kind of sanction? And does this mean then that the judicial system in our country will then be able to say, okay, there's something here that people have given under evidence, and maybe we can pursue criminal cases or other forms of cases. I find that part to be a very gray area for me.
Sanusha, there's so much to unpack, and I want us to tap into those gray areas that you speak of. So I'm going to ask you to stay on, and then when we return, we continue unpacking Deputy Chief Justice Zondo's briefing on the state capture.